Hello, welcome to another episode of the Data Science Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Dave Cole, and today's guest is Srujana Kaddevarmuth. Srujana, welcome to the DSL Podcast.
Thank you for having me here.
Great. So, Srujana is the Senior Director of AI at Walmart Global Tech. And today, Srujana and I will be talking about next-gen AI. We'll be talking about data science at scale. As you might imagine, Walmart has just a ton of data. And women in data science. So that's a topic that we've sort of touched on lightly in the past, but Srujana has done a lot of interesting work that I'd love to dive into to help increase the number of women in data science. So let's start sort of at the top. So in the DSL podcast, we talk from time to time about the sort of the balance between doing sort of cutting edge research and experimentation, along with sort of the bread and butter type work of doing project based work with our customers, with our business, sort of business customers. So, as the director of AI, how do you go about sort of delving into these next gen technologies? Like, what would you tell a peer of yours in terms of like how to go about sort of experimenting?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Dave, for this very interesting question, right? So, leading the AI charter for a company like Walmart would mean building commercial grade next generation artificial intelligence technology capabilities for our existing omni retail business, as well as for a new and emerging business in the consumer ad tech space like Walmart Connect, as well as looking at building some new capabilities in a new and emerging technology space like for tech monetization, data monetization through our new ventures like data ventures as well as Luminate. As a part of this process and as a part of this journey, we build a lot of these capabilities. Specifically, the team is doing a lot of cutting edge work in the space of search, personalization, building numerous recommendation engines, conversational platforms, and deploying them at scale, as well as deploying numerous chatbots so that we can engage the customers in a much inclusive manner to create extensive, exclusive, as well as personalized customer journeys across geographies, across different domains of our businesses, and to unlock the financial value for the organization. As a part of this journey, we built some capabilities such as visual search, multilingual language translation, looking at semantic sentiment extraction from the product reviews, which requires a lot of image data using different techniques and capabilities around computer vision, natural language processing, deep learning, reinforcement learning, looking at even using and infusing these capabilities with some technologies that are metaverse immersion through Internet of Things, AR, VR capabilities, as well as exploring OCR capabilities for entity and image extraction. All of these different capabilities, in combination with the scale and complexity of data that we are handling, in combination with a unique tech stack that we are using to deploy these products across different markets, make these entire products as next gen, as they are helping us generate intellectual property for the organization, building different products, as well as acquiring various patents, and also helping us drive this kind of a retail disruption across the industry.
Wow. So I think when it comes to sort of cutting edge AI, I was trying to take some notes as you were going there. Computer vision, deep learning, chat bots, visual search. You're pretty much hitting on all of the cutting edge sort of data science sort of areas. So tell me a little bit more, like diving into your day to day. So there's a lot that you can do, and maybe you're doing all of these things, but at the same time, but something tells me that you're having to prioritize. So how are you going about determining what sort of area that you want to go ahead and experiment in, and help me understand like the roles on your team. Like how are you able to to delve into these cutting edge technologies?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a need for cross pollination happening across the organization, and this, especially when you're talking about these technologies, right? And also, the organization as Walmart, we are talking about, has a huge scale. So we have
Hmm.
multiple decentralized team doing a lot of work, building different AI capabilities. But as an organization, we are focused a lot in terms of building the ecosystem for leveraging, reusing, and expediting the overall go-to-market strategy as well as our time. There's a focus on engineering excellence. There's a focus on using tools that can help us have transparency in terms of what has been built as baseline models so that we can pick and customize that rather than every team doing all of these things from scratch, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's not necessarily very prudent use of energy as well as resources. So there's a huge focus in terms of leveraging and reusing. And also there's a focus around cross-pollinating these ideas across the organization and getting the teams to collaborate in a cross-functional manner to achieve positive outcomes. We have various avenues to do that. We are building certain communities within our organization, and these communities are domain specific. So we call them communities of practice. We have communities of practice around data science, we have communities of practice around governance, as well as around engineering. So what these communities do is they provide an avenue, a platform for us to share some of the interesting work that is happening within our teams and cross-pollinate these ideas. We also talk about some of the roadblocks, challenges, technological impediments that we may have, and how do we remove these roadblocks? How do we brainstorm on coming up with some interesting ideas? There's also a committee called as Data Science Council, wherein we have people from different walks of the industry. We have people from product, engineering, as well as CX UX space, and they are the ones who actually have a first look at these products that we are building and also help us drive adoption of these products across the business, which is extremely important. Prioritizing what is important for the business and cross-pollinating these ideas are going to be extremely important. And as a part of this, we also have other avenues such as there are internal summits, there are conferences, we run the book review clubs, the paper review clubs to cross-pollinate ideas and to leverage efficiency and economies of scale.
Okay. Wow. All right. So you have internal communities that bring, I think, some of the various data scientists that are sort of decentralized sort of together to talk. And is that where the cross pollination you think happens?
That's
I mean, you
true.
mentioned that like a lot of the models are sort of their base models, and then those models get sort of pushed out to the various teams, and then they can sort of add and use those models. Like, how do you go about doing that? I mean, is it just through meeting regularly and people are made aware of these models, or is there tools or systems that help you with that?
Yeah, there are definitely some tools like we use model registry wherein we
Mm-hmm.
document all the models that are being built. And that gives a transparent view to all the data scientists and AI scientists in the organization to understand where are those baseline models and
Mm-hmm.
also look at whether these data sets that these models are consuming are they governed at source, right? So that kind
Mm-hmm.
of gives them the first baseline model that can further customize, and this helps with experimentation and expediting the overall roadmap as well. Also, there's one nuance that I think it's important for us to understand here, which is the scale, right? There's
Yeah.
complexity that's associated with scale. If you look at Walmart as an organization, it has millions of customers across the globe, and we have around 2.2 million employees across the globe working towards creating these unique shopping experiences for our customers. So the data that gets generated is just humongous. It runs into petabytes at any given point of time, and it
Right.
is heterogeneous, it is messy, it's non-intuitive in nature. So being able to tame this data, an AI leader is expected not only to have a very good and sound understanding of AI domain, but also understand the technology stack, as well as bring in that kind of a product mindset so that we build the products based on functionality and usage, not necessarily build something that is just purely powered by academic research or research acumen, right? So there's a
Right.
lot of emphasis in terms of democratizing the data, AI capabilities, as well as productizing data science and AI capabilities.
Got it. And one way to sort of productize that, I imagine, is sort of starting with a model registry, actually having something that allows people to reuse models that have been previously created, and then actually sort of embedding them into the various sort of customer-facing functions or products, I should say. And you mentioned like a data science council that then it sounds like extends beyond just your standard sort of embedded data scientists themselves, but expands into the engineering team, product team, even you mentioned customer experience as well. So how has that gone? Like I imagine that's a mixture of people who probably are data scientists, and then those who are sort of interested in how data science can help their various sort of departments. Do I have that right?
Yes, that's right. So, data science as a domain itself is highly interdisciplinary in nature. So, it's
Yeah.
extremely important for us to drive adoption of these technologies across the business. We build the most novel solutions, but if they are not necessarily seeing a great adoption across the business, then they are not necessarily successful, right?
Right.
And if you are looking at scale of organization that operates across different geographies, that has got humongous amount of data, it is not very prudent for us to build one-off solutions to solve one-off business use case. There's a focus on productizing data science, and that is primarily a journey of translating the insights that are generated from the exploratory analysis into scalable models that can power products. It involves nuances of building and deploying the models in the production environment. So, productizing data science helps the organization move up the data and AI value chain. It helps the organization unlock a lot of financial impact, uh, and also helps us as an organization to effectively utilize our human capital, as you are rightly pointing out, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
extremely important for us to keep the data scientists engaged with the kind of work that they love the most, and not necessarily work on something that's mundane and repetitive. So there's a heavy focus on automating, because when we automate, machines take up a lot of these mundane repetitive tasks, thereby giving the bandwidth for the AI scientists to experiment and do this experimentation at scale, come up with a lot of innovative ideas and solutions, and generate intellectual property for the organization. Apart from this, there's also an added advantage of productizing AI and data science. That is, for the organization that operates at such humongous scale, it helps in standardizing the tech capabilities across the organization, across businesses, across geographies. And it also helps us effectively enhance our models as well as the overall data and governance ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, you've touched on this a few times, but just talking about sort of our next topic, which is sort of a nice segue into our next topic, which is talking about data science at scale. I think 2.2 million employees alone is just a fascinating statistic, and when you expand to the number of customers that Walmart has, it's magnitudes of that, of course, as well, and then the amount of data that you're then generating throughout the organization and all sorts of various sort of customer interactions and touch points, and even non-customer touch points. You're just dealing with, as you mentioned, petabytes of data. So for other sort of data science leaders who maybe are dealing with maybe not data quantities at that size, or maybe they do have data quantities at that size, like what sort of advice do you have for them? What are some of the
Yeah.
challenges that you see at sort of doing data science with such large amounts of data?
Yeah. So one of the very interesting aspect here is to kind of also understand how do we train our models and build these
Right.
models on such large data sets, right? And because these data sets have got millions of variables, and being able to look at various considerations is going to be important. And that's the suggestion that I would give my peers across different industries who are dealing with such humongous amount of data. So there are a few considerations that we need to kind of bake in while building these products. The first one happens to be the AI or data science consideration. So what do I mean by that is that we need to look at the overall architectural design, looking at the overall engineering tech stack, even at the stage of creating the proof of concept. I've seen that there is a common mistake that people do across the industry is complete the proof of concept and then start thinking of the underlying tech stack, which would require you to do a major architectural redesign, and which would delay the productization of data science as well as getting the products out to the market. So having this kind of a data science and engineering consideration is going to be important. The second aspect is having the data governance consideration. So as we have multiple variables that are going to be used to train these models, that too at scale, it's important to understand, are we governing these data sources? Are these data sources having any kind of a PII information? If so, have we encrypted that? Is there a geolocation information? Have we encrypted that? As the data regulatory framework is evolving at a lightning speed, and there are new regulations that are coming in, ensuring that there is a compliance is going to be important, more from the legal perspective, and also to build trustworthy solutions that are going to create goodwill with the customers across the industry. So having that consideration is also important. There's another aspect that people should be focusing on, which is the AI consideration, which primarily focuses on the phenomenons like concept drift, right? Which is nothing but the phenomena that machine learning algorithms tend to get smarter over a period of time with a constant feed of new data. But if they are not connected to the constant feed of new data, they degrade in quality, and that happens pretty fast. So one of the common mistake most people across the industry do is thinking of these AI algorithms as similar to that of the software products. In reality,
Yeah.
they are not. They need to be treated differently, and this difference has to be baked in early on in the product development and project life cycles to mitigate any kind of risks at the later point of time. The other aspect is around unintended consequences. So, machine learning algorithms are the statistical representation of the world that we live in. They come up with some sort of solutions based on the data that's been provided to them, but they're not necessarily perfect all the times, right? They have this inherent tendency of perpetuating and amplifying the biases that are present in the data and in society at large. Being able to identify this is going to be important, especially if you're building some technologies like recommendation systems. For example, we focus on building recommendation systems a lot, and there is always a focus on making sure that there is no hyper personalization that's happening, because hyper personalization lead to filter bubble. That is, it keeps reinforcing the same interests and belief systems within the customers, which is not necessarily good because people think that they are getting the representative view of the world. In reality, they are not, and that's not necessarily good. So, keeping in mind all of these considerations are important to build the models, train them on these large data sets, and scale them effectively.
Help me understand hyper personalization. I haven't heard that. Help me understand a little bit more about what you mean by that. I can guess, but what does that mean?
Yeah, so I can give you an example, right? So, if you are always opting for a particular brand,
Mm-hmm.
or if you are always watching a particular content on the site, then my algorithms are going to show you the similar kind of a
Right.
content or the same kind of a brands. However, that is not necessarily giving you the representative view of the world. There may be something out there that should also be baked in to give you a representative view of the world. So personalization is good, but if we go ahead with a hyper personalization, we are keeping on reinforcing the same interests and belief systems. So Eli Partzer came up with a word filter bubble for that, and
Mm-hmm.
being these AI experts building in these recommendation engines, one needs to be aware of these unintended consequences and bake them in while making sure that we are developing these scalable products that are touching multiple sections of the society.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think we've all sort of encountered that. If you look at my, my news feed, it can be sort of focused too much on sports, and I'm like, I actually, yes, I love sports, but I love, to learn about other things too, and sort of, sprinkling those in and allowing me to be a more diverse sort of reader is it would be helpful to me. So going back to something you said, I think like hearing you talk about sort of doing data science at scale, I think there was one real important takeaway that I heard from you, which is, when you're dealing with such large amounts of data, you really have to be very thoughtful. You have to be. It can be kind of dangerous to do a POC on sort of small amounts of data. Imagine the business is going to be anxious to say like, okay, let's go ahead and let's actually put this model into production. But if you haven't thought about whether or not it actually can scale, and if you did it in sort of a quick and dirty way, you might be months and months away from actually being able to put that into production, or even worse, if you think that like what you built actually is going to scale and you're sort of incorrect, that it could really delay, I think, that model from sort of having impact. And data governance as well. I think, again, that sort of feeds the theme of avoiding rework, right? So if you are using a data set and it hasn't gone through the proper governance channels, hasn't been sort of encrypted to obfuscate, PII or other ways in which other sort of identifiable information, again, you're gonna have rework. So I think, like, is there any sort of recommendation that you have to ensure that these things are in place? I mean, do you have reviews early on in sort of the experimentation sort of phase of the data science lifecycle? Is there anything that you would sort of recommend to avoid these pitfalls?
Yeah, so obviously there needs to be a proper process that needs to be established in phase. And also there is importance of ensuring that there is effective model governance, as well as operational excellence that's baked into this process. We
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of these reviews that are done at every phase of the product development and project life cycle, wherein we are transparently discussing about a lot of these problems. And as data scientists, we are always challenged because there is always inundation of new technology, tools,
Yeah.
and platforms. So it's important for us to be very transparent and look at all of these as learning opportunities rather than considering them as any kind of a failures or risk. And also, as leaders, it's important for us to exercise a little bit of a risk appetite to be able to overcome these challenges in a sustainable manner, as well as to ensure that we keep up the team morale and build a high throughput team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's a if when you're talking about next gen AI, you have to have a certain amount of sort of a risk appetite. You have to have an experimentation sort of mindset, and that's also like you were mentioning, a great way to keep your team sort of energized. I think I've sort of said this before, but I have sort of a belief that if you're not learning, you're leaving, right? If you're not learning something new, like data scientists are naturally, should be naturally curious people, and they might be looking for their next challenge, problem or challenge. So taking some of those risks allows them to be on the cutting edge and allows them hopefully to continue to learn. Before we move on to our next big topic, there was one role that that you said in passing, and you mentioned data scientist, obviously, but you also mentioned an AI scientist. Is that actually a separate role at
Yeah,
Walmart?
right. So we look at data science and analytics as a kind of data science as a progression of analytics, and
Hmm.
AI is more focused on ML engineering, right? So
I gotcha. Okay.
it's all about scaling. So there's a huge focus for building something that can be scaled, all right? So looking at unconventional methodologies and scaling that, that's what we call that particular category and the job family as AI scientists. The job families across the industry are not necessarily very streamlined,
Right.
but the
Right.
talent in terms of what is needed to do a certain role is going to be important as we think of building these teams and acquiring them as well as growing them in a long-term manner.
Yeah, I would imagine that the ML engineering team is again, given the scale that you're sort of dealing with, is a very critical team to
That's right.
Walmart's success. Um, so, is that true? I mean, is this a team that is seasoned? I mean, I have to imagine that some of the best and brightest are on that team.
Yes, absolutely. So there is a need, and this is a very important and critical team.
Hmm.
We also have certain hubs of these teams because many a times there are a lot of these deployments happening across the organization, and we have limited resources. It's extremely important for us to make sure that we prioritize and invest the right amount of human capital for the right kind of a projects which are of strategic importance to the organization. So there's a huge focus in terms of being very meaningful in terms of how we deploy and utilize human capital, as well as being intentional in terms of growing these teams so that they get a lot of opportunities across the organization to move and navigate and explore growth opportunities internally within the organization as well.
Great. Let's move on to our last and final topic, which is women in data science. So tell me, maybe you can tell me a little bit about your story. I'd love to hear, like, how did you get into data science? And then I'd love to hear you sort of be candid about some of the challenges maybe that you've faced. Certainly in terms of just looking at the sheer numbers of women in data science as sort of a percentage, it's way lower than what we'd like to see. The number that I've quoted in the past is around 19%. I think that's going up a little bit, but thanks to people like you. But what are some of the challenges that you have faced?
Yes, absolutely. I can talk a little bit about that. But I would also want to kind of bring the attention of the audience to some of the statistics that you mentioned, right?
Hmm.
First, talking about why do we need more women in data science? Primarily because women in tech statistics indicates that, data science as well as the emerging technology domains themselves are very highly male dominant. Around 80% of the jobs in the technology domain are held by men, with only 20% being held by women.
Hmm.
And only 37% of the tech startups have at least one female member in the board of directors. And stats further reveal that only 26% of the computing related jobs are held by women, and out of that, only 3% are held by African American women, 6% by Asian women, and 2% by Hispanic women. And the situation was getting better. However, with the onset of pandemic, situation has gone for a toss, primarily because pandemic has continued to exacerbate this kind of a gender inequality, as well as the digital divide across the society. CNN Business Insights recently quoted that around 617,000 women were displaced from the workforce in the month of September 2020, as compared to 71,000 men. And these women who were displaced from the workforce were in the prime working age of between 32 to 45 years.
Wow.
And it's extremely important to make sure that we bring and bridge this kind of a gender digital divide, as well as gender gap here, primarily because one of the issues that we are facing is pandemic has continued to exacerbate these inequalities in corporate America, and also, if not displacing women from the tech workforce, they are being at least emotionally penalized because they are mostly the caregivers of the family. So it has taken a toll on their emotional and psychological well-being. And emerging technology domains are influencing almost all facets of our life, transforming almost all industries that we could possibly think of. When we have these technologies being used by almost all sections of the society, doesn't it make sense for us to have an equal representation amongst the people who are actually building this? And that's one of the very important reasons that we need to have uh, gender equality and parity in terms of building these technologies so that they are sustainable and used across different domains. In terms of my experience, I wanted to be a doctor. Fortunately or unfortunately, I happened to be. I chose engineering for my graduation and pursued in this particular domain. Data science was not a very popular field at that point of time, right? So we had operational research, we had analytics, and a lot of things grew. Being open to these non-linear opportunities actually helped me land in a better position. Being open to these new technologies is very important. That's what I would suggest the newcomers. With all the information that we have at hand, we will still not be able to predict what will be the next greatest technology that will be available in the next few years. So being open to these nonlinear career paths is going to be important as we explore and experiment more. In terms of what we are doing to bring in more women in the data science domain, I would like to say that there are multiple initiatives that are consciously being taken by multiple people across the globe. One of the initiatives that I would like to bring everybody's attention to is WITS, which is Women in Data Science Initiative, which is primarily it was initiated by Stanford University with multiple partners across the globe. It has now become a global movement with around 100,000 participants across more than 100 countries. As a part of this initiative, we have different avenues wherein people can engage. One of that happens to be a Datathon initiative, wherein we call for Datathon challenge based on social impact. And this helps the data science enthusiasts across the globe to hone the required data science skill set. And one of the requirement is at least 50% of these teams should be women. So it kind of encourages women participation as well, and learning and honing new skill sets, because there will be mentors assigned through this journey, as well as a lot of resources provided, and at the same time contributing to the social change. It's a very fulfilling experience. The second part of this initiative is the conference. As a part of this global conference, we celebrate a lot of luminaries in the data science field who are women and create role models for the younger generation. The third aspect of this is the podcast series, wherein we talk about some of the interesting paths that luminaries and female data scientists across the globe have taken, some of the challenges that they faced, how did they overcome those challenges, to inspire more younger women to pursue STEM career opportunities and excel in the domain. And also the last component is the educational outreach program, wherein we are trying to capture the imagination of the girls in the higher grades of their education, so that they can explore the potential of the STEM courses and enter in this domain. One of the recent statistics or studies by McKinsey and Company indicated that corporate America is at the crossroads, and the decisions that the corporate leadership would make today will have the consequences on gender equality for years to come, which is true. So while there are a lot of opportunities, the future of women in data science or women in tech would primarily depend on tech industry's ability to attract more girls to study STEM courses, enter the STEM domain, and have a fruitful career by creating the right ecosystem, not only encouraging them to join the corporate sector, but also development sector so that we can create a better socioeconomic impact.
Yeah, I think in the for those of you who are still asking the question, why, why is this important? I think there's plenty of studies, right, that have shown that a more diverse sort of data science team leads to better outcomes. I mean, just it's that simple. So if you're looking for just a very practical answer to that, I think the main reason for that is that you get sort of different opinions, and so much of data science is experimentation, right? It is trying new ideas, looking at things from different angles. And you also mentioned something that was kind of interesting. I mean, yes, there's the women in data science sort of conference. There's WIDS, which would be a great thing, for other data science leaders out there to participate in. But also, you mentioned you used the phrase, nonlinear career paths, and tell me what you mean by that, because I think that's another
Yeah.
important way.
So many a times when you talk about like linear career paths, it's that you would look at fine, it's engineering or it's being a doctor or being a lawyer, right? So there are like a lot of those offshoots wherein you can experiment and explore, which are intersection between different domains, right?
Right.
So those are non-linear career paths according to me because they are not necessarily fitting into a particular well-defined conventional boundaries of one domain versus the other. There are all of these different intersections, and especially with robotics, Internet of Things, and metaverse immersion, and all of these technologies, there is a high potential for these interdisciplinary technologies, right? So being open to these opportunities and pursuing career in that space is also going to be an interesting and a exciting journey for most of us.
Yeah, and I think it's not just being open to individuals, sort of getting into those, sort of moving laterally and sort of change, maybe starting in a pure engineering role and then becoming a data scientist, or maybe even starting in sort of the world of bio, right, and then moving into sort of being a data scientist. But I think also it's important for data science leaders to be open to hiring folks like this, right, who maybe are trying to change careers and trying to move into the data science realm, and they're taking sort of night courses or classes to try to sort of build up that expertise, and coming from a non-traditional, pure, data and analytics sort of background. I mean, I think that's one, sort of obvious and easy way to sort of increase the diversity of your team is just by opening your mind. You don't need to have a team full of sort of PhDs in stats that have sort of gone down this path for years and years and years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, Srujana, like I really enjoyed our conversations today. I think that we touched on a lot of important topics. It sounds like you have an exciting job solving some incredibly challenging problems. If people want to reach out to you, can they link up with you on LinkedIn or in social media?
Yeah, absolutely. You can reach out to me at Srujana Kaddevarmuth, at LinkedIn. So I'd be more than happy to have a conversation. Would love to engage because I enjoy fostering communities of data science professionals, and I would be happy to learn mutually as well.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for joining us on the Data Science Leader podcast. I really enjoyed it, Srujana. Have a great day.
Thank you for having me, Dave. Take care.